the file that the HPCSA requires from us now to ensure that those of you who are registered health professionals get your CPD points. So there's nothing that needs to be done on your side. As long as you've already registered, we'll sort that out in the background. This evening, we'll follow the standard practice that we have been following for most of these webinars, and that is that when we do come to the Q&A at the end, we will ask you please to type your questions into the Q&A box. It is much quicker, much more efficient, and we get through more questions that way than if we allow people to speak, because they then tend to run on a little, and that way more people get a chance to be involved in the discussion. It's very exciting for me this evening to be able to welcome Dr. Liesel Groenewald and Martha Ngoye to this event, and I hope that there is a great deal that we'll be able to learn from their experience and their knowledge around whistleblowing. Of course, we all are aware of the tragic death of Babita Deokaran last year, and aware of just how costly whistleblowing can be. And so we start off by honoring those who have gone to the trouble of putting themselves at risk and often had to take on very, very costly consequences as a result of standing up for what is right and trying to ensure that others are treated correctly. And so I'd like to start off by honoring the whistleblowers of this country, and they of course are far more than those that we hear about, because in small ways people make their contribution all the time. It takes a great deal of bravery. We also remember the story of Tim de Meyer and how he exposed some problems at the hospital he's working at. His story does come with a little bit of a silver lining, in as much as, from what I hear, there have been some improvements as a result of the whole event. And that's kind of what sparked my interest in the idea of having a session on whistleblowing, because it seems to me that it may be one of the ways in which, if strengthened, we could actually make some kind of difference in our healthcare system with its so very many problems at the moment. So I'm not too sure how this is going to pan out, but I'm hoping that we will come to the end of our session together with a bit of a better idea of how whistleblowers can be supported and strengthened. And I'm sure that our speakers will speak to that as we go along. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Dr. Cornelia Siwusho, who will introduce our speakers properly.
So thank you so much, Kevin, and good day to you all. We are really excited to have you join us this evening for our Ethics Alive webinar on whistleblowing. If this is the answer to healthcare systems problems, and then what problems? Our speakers are renowned in their respective fields, and it is a great pleasure for me to introduce them to you this evening. The first speaker is Dr. Liesel Groenewald. Dr. Liesel is the Senior Manager, Organizational Ethics at the Ethics Institute in South Africa. She was the immediate past president of the Business Ethics Network of Africa and a certified ethics officer since 2004. Liesel holds a BA in communication science, a master's degree, and a doctoral degree in applied ethics. Dr. Liesel's main research interest is in organizational ethics, and Liesel has been raising and addressing key questions regarding whistleblowing management systems, governance of whistleblowing, as well as non-retaliation of whistleblowers. So Liesel, thank you so much for availing yourself for us this evening. And before you proceed with your presentation, can I again remind our participants at this webinar to please use the Q&A box to post your questions. So Liesel, I will now yield the floor to you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to see there are so many people, and I hope that it is not just because you are going to get, or for your CPD points. So yeah, I am going to just share a presentation. I know Martha is just going to talk from memory, but I need some guidance. So just give me a sec. And here it comes, I hope. You know, I say slideshow. Good. All right. So, excuse me, I have disclaimer. I have a cold. So what I'm just briefly going to talk about is, who is this person that we call a whistleblower? It's not a long presentation. I'm looking at the psyche of a whistleblower, and then of course I will look at some of the detriments. And we have Martha here, who can either confirm or say, no, I'm talking a lot of nonsense in terms of the psyche of a whistleblower. And the reason why I want to look at this is we need to understand who are the people, typically our colleagues and our peers, who will blow the whistle when and if they have to do so. So, of course, I have to start with some kind of a definition, and I'm not going to bore you with these definitions, but the term whistleblower actually comes from a connotation with enforcement officials in the 19th century, when they used a whistle to alert the public or fellow police that a crime is occurring. So the whistle is not just because we think it should be a whistle. There was actually a real connotation to it. But the first modern use of this term was by the US consumer activist Ralph Nader in 1971, when he said that whistleblowing is an act of a man or a woman who, believing that the public interest overrides the interest of the organization he or she serves, blows the whistle that the organization is involved in corrupt, illegal, fraudulent, or harmful activity. So you can see already here, it is about the public interest. It's not about the individual. It's about the public interest. And of course, there are many other definitions. I'm not going to read this to you, but the one thing that stands out for me in terms of whistleblowing is that the person who decides now that I am going to blow the whistle, do it to a person or an authority that they believe will take action. And that is where things often go wrong. They don't just put it out there. They trust that to whoever they are blowing the whistle to will take action on their report. And I highlight it with those things. So why do people blow the whistle? Well, there are social factors, for instance, that they want to protect the well-being of society. They know that what is happening here is not in the public interest, and it is to the detriment of the well-being of the society. So they want to put it out there. Sometimes it is done with a pattern of prerogative behavior, such as patriotism and generosity and dedication. And maybe we can hear from Martha what her motivation was. But here I have, okay, Edward Snowden is now from America, but I do believe that someone like Bianca Goodson moved from a patriotic motivation. Now, cultural factors, I find this quite interesting, is that the research tells us that in your interdependent cultures, fewer people will blow the whistle. And we're thinking here of people, of cultures in the Far East, for example, or even the Middle East, where the problem, and maybe also on our continent, where the problem needs to be solved, can I say, as close to the source as possible before we go out and wash our laundry in the public. Whereas people who grow up in an independent culture, in other words, where the individual is more prominent than the group, those people, and in those cultures, we see that there are many more people that blow the whistle. Then, of course, I think this is self-explanatory from a religious factors. What happens is if a person is highly religious, they don't leave that, at the door when they go, when they enter the works environment. It comes with them, and they approach their work and the way they relate to their colleagues and their supervisors and so on with that same, the values of their religion. And when these are transgressed, then they will stand up and do the right thing or speak up. And then there are those individual factors. The whistleblower very often wants to protect him or herself, but not only the self, but also others that are affected by this unethical conduct. And that then would be the colleagues again, friends within the employment circle, and then of course we go out to the public interest again. The individual can or individuals' interests can be material based, but I don't know. From my interaction with whistleblowers, I've actually not found that, and then very often spiritual based. And then it's often done to achieve individual gains in various kinds, such as personal courage and having self-confidence and having self-control. So what you find is your whistleblower typically, this typically is a person with good self-confidence. And therefore, they know that they can speak up because they believe that they can do so, and they want to control the environment and make sure that what is wrong here is addressed so that it becomes right again. Interesting, just who blows the whistle typically? Well, typically they say it's married people. And middle-aged, Martha, and sorry, and then there are studies that differ, that they say that in America more females blow the whistle, whereas in South Africa apparently more males. I think the issue about marriage or being married has to do with, I have a family that I still have to protect. I still have to look after them. And therefore, I don't want to lose my job. I want to see my career flourish. And therefore, I will rather try to put what is wrong right if I can. Then also, typically, a whistleblower has a higher level of professional status than those who choose not to report. And this comes again with self-confidence. And that wish to be in control and put things right when they are wrong. Also, high organizational commitment. You know that very often whistleblowers are typified as being disloyal or being traitors. That's not the case. In fact, it's completely the opposite. They have high commitment to the organization. They want the organization to succeed. Usually they have enough income, let's not say a high income, but sufficient income. So they feel comfortable and confident in the position that they are, and they can leverage that. And coupled to that, usually they have a high job performance. They are in the top echelons of an organization typically. They feel respected and powerful, not in the negative sense, but that they will be listened to when they say something. And because they're invested in the organization, they have this meaningful connection. They say that your whistleblower is typically someone who has been in the organization for quite some time already, and they intend to stay there for much longer. The research says 3 years and longer. I have no idea why they say 3 years, but it says, because this person is so invested in the organization, this is where their career is, and they want to succeed, and they take their role seriously. Now, in terms of the personal characteristics, there are not really what's the word, agreement in terms of what typically are the characteristics of whistleblowers, but there is agreement that there's something in the makeup, in the psyche of a whistleblower or a person who decides to become a whistleblower, to do it and in spite of possibly jeopardizing their career and possibly facing ostracism and possibly suffering retaliation. Yeah, so it's there, but there's still that something else that makes this person stand out from others who see what is happening, but rather, don't want to rock the boat. I'll rather keep quiet. So, of course, these characteristics that research has determined is that of these people, our whistleblowers, have high ideals. I've already explained. They want to succeed. They have staunch principles, of course. They have a deep ingrained value system, and they cannot. They're not interested in altering their behavior just because the organizational culture requires of them now to look the other way. In weak organizational cultures, there's much more unethical conduct happening, but people actually report less in those kind of organizational cultures. So we have individuals with deeply ingrained personal values. They take the values of the organization seriously. Their personal values and that of the organization will be aligned. Otherwise, they won't work there. But now, or in the industry, okay? So, but now what happens, there's unethical conduct here that is not aligned with their personal values. And because they have this strong sense of commitment to that, to their values, they decide that they will speak up. And they sometimes, often, they feel angry at the organization. How on earth could this have occurred on my watch or happened on my watch? We as an organization say, we have all these fantastic values, or we as professionals say, we have all these fantastic values, usually on a poster somewhere, I don't know where. So it's all there on paper, but we're not actually living it. So I'm feeling angry about that. I feel disappointed, and I want to restore the moral order of this organization that I love so much. And then there's also a sense of community, and this can be based on either ideological or religious beliefs, or then professional beliefs, that professional code of conduct, that purpose that a profession has, i.e. to care for others. And then the locus of control is internal. I'm not doing the right thing because of extrinsic motivation. No, I want to report, I want to set things straight because I have intrinsic motivation to do so. What's the one that okay, so sometimes there are situational characteristics as well, which means that the organizational culture or the culture within the sector or the profession can determine to some extent whether a person will blow the whistle or not. If it's a sector where blowing the whistle is viewed as, how could you have done that, is viewed as someone being disloyal, then a person might not want to do so. But where there's a culture where people are free to speak up without the fear of retaliation, then people will more easily blow the whistle. There's also sometimes a disconnect between managers and professionals. And that is interesting because what you find is that a person who is a professional, but in like you all are, but who's in a managerial role, there's a dissonance in loyalty, but we find that the loyalty ultimately moves towards the professional role and not that necessarily of the organizational role. And then, of course, people blow the whistle much easier, if one can say it that way, if they believe that there is support for them. So that's just my own definition. I'm sorry, these slides are not supposed to be here. Wrong one. All right, but what is the reality? The reality is that organizations and sectors come up with these things. They say, no, these whistleblowers are just rocking the boat. They're upsetting the apple cart. Everything was going perfectly well in this hospital. And now this doctor is telling the world that things are not working here. That person is viewed as a snitch or as an impimpi, which of course we know has a negative connotation. This person is disloyal. In fact, we know that the person is actually more than loyal to the organization. This person is a traitor. They're setting us up. This person is a disgruntled employee. Maybe they didn't get the performance bonus they were supposed to get. Or people will say, no, man, this is just nonsense. We have an ethical culture. Look, we never get any reports through the whistleblowing line. So, this one is just completely out of line. This one who has now blew the whistle. So this is something that a whistleblower has said, who blew the whistle on a huge safety issues. And this whistleblower wrote to the CEO and said, and sir, I'm not disgruntled, angry, or bitter. I have more than enough in terms of being able to look after myself. But I'm very persistent about protecting innocent human lives like yours and mine. Can you see the values, the staunch principles that come out there, and the public interest? Okay, and this person has been fighting the battle for about 7 years now. Then the former CEO of the Ethics and Compliance Initiative in the US at some point said that many see whistleblower as a derogatory term for a disloyal employee. But we've found that the whistleblower is often forced to go outside the organization, either by fear, inaction, or both. So if the organization does nothing, the whistleblower might go outside. Briefly, what goes through the mind of a whistleblower, I'm not going to go into detail in this, is that there is firstly this awareness that something is wrong and I should do something. Now, if I am not attuned to my ethical standards and my values and that of the organization or the profession, it might take me longer to actually realize what is unethical around me. And that sounds stupid, but it actually happens in that way. And then the question of agency, am I the one to make a difference? Can I make the difference? If the answer is no, of course, I say, no, I won't do anything. Should I invest in this process? Should I be the one to say something? And these answers, Martha, I believe, do not come overnight. I would think it takes some time to get answers to this. And then when that decision has been reached that, yes, I should be the one to say something, I can't stand this any longer. What I think of then as a whistleblower is, who's going to support me? Am I connected? Who will my managers or my executive or my colleagues, will they support me? And most often, whistleblowers tell me that they believe that they will be supported. The same with their family members. But we find that in some cases, the family members just said, bye-bye. You are putting too much stress on us. You are putting us in danger. Okay, so it's not an easy decision. I'm going to skip a few slides here just because I said I'm going to not go into that. I want to show you this. So this is research that was conducted in 2021 by the Institute of Business Ethics in the UK in 13 countries, and it included South Africa. And they asked people, have you observed misconduct? And if so, did you report it or didn't you report it? And if you didn't report it, what were the reasons? And the first reason in South Africa, 48% of those people who blew the whistle said that they felt they might jeopardize their jobs. Okay. And the second most cited reason, that is 1/3 of those who blew the whistle in 2021 said they did not believe that corrective action will be taken. Now, remember the definition of a whistleblower: someone who reports something because to someone who they believe will act. So you can see there's distrust in the system. So one of the whistleblowers I have spoken to said that, you know, once you blow the whistle, you get targeted, bullied, emotionally blackmailed, emotionally abused, everything to get rid of you as soon as possible. And another one said, if the basic foundation is threatened, i.e. food security, those things in Maslow's pyramid, people won't blow the whistle. Now, we find that there are many policies around there, and by law, organizations must have whistleblowing policies, but I call it the unfulfilled promise, because all of these policies by law must include portions that says, we will protect you from occupational detriment. But then we find that, do they? In the same study that was conducted, we found that in South Africa, 37, more than 1/3 of those people who blew the whistle were, in 2021, were retaliated against or were victimized. One can say, oh, but that means there's another about 53% who were not retaliated against. Yes, that's true. And that is good news. But there's still 37%. And something needs to be done about that. You know about the detriments that whistleblowers suffer, and our Protected Disclosures Act, as amended, Act 5 of 2017, protect a person or a whistleblower from these types of occupational detriment or victimization. Trumped up disciplinary charges, I'm sure Martha will talk about that. Suspension for no obvious reason. Demotion, there's a friend of mine, also a whistleblower, was the head of criminal investigations of one of the government departments, where she had 2,500 people reporting to her countrywide. After she blew the whistle, she was made regional manager with 150 criminal investigators reporting to her. Dismissal for no obvious reason, adjusting the job duties like in Renel's case, a transfer against the will of the employee, sending them from the office in Cape Town to the office in Kuruman, for example, and then not giving them the promotion that was due. Changing the terms and conditions of employment and retirement to their disadvantage. Refusal of a reference or being provided with adverse reference if they have been lucky to find another job. And then this is the favorite, I think, out there, is the civil claim against the whistleblower arising from the breach of confidentiality requirements, either of their profession or in where they are employed. And this is, of course, where problem starts, because if I blew the, let's say I work for ABSA, and I blew the whistle on something in ABSA, do I have the money to take on ABSA? Because they are now taking me to court. They have the worlds of money and lawyers and things. And I, little Liesel Groenewald, don't have a job anymore. So, you know, where am I going to get the funds from? But what is not protected, and what is not protected, in any law, in all globally, is the psychological harm that whistleblowers suffer. there's post-traumatic stress disorder, there's anxiety, there's panic attacks, there's episodes of major depression. And these can last for a long, long, long time, years after the fact. There's damage to properties. There's damage to vehicles. People are being pushed off the roads. There's, or the vehicles are being tampered with. There's reputational harm. Of course, there's a negative impact on the financial position of our whistleblowers. Threats to children, where a whistleblower has to take their children to school with bodyguards. Torture that has happened recently with the Malawian whistleblower. And then, of course, assassination. And thank you, Kevin, for paying homage to our whistleblowers in that regard. But I'll end, I'm nearly done, in that we do remember Babita, and so we should. But we should also remember some of our other whistleblowers who have died or who were killed because they did the right thing. They stood up for their principles. And this is Mospaku. Mospaku was assassinated in his driveway in 2009 in front of his children, or his child, his boy. And he blew the whistle on corruption in the municipality in Rustenburg. He also took his files to Nkandla. Maybe that was, sorry, not such a good idea. My apologies. Who of you know Dr. Lennox Garane? Dr. Garane worked in the parliamentary offices, and he reported some unethical conduct in those offices, and he was bullied to the point that he put a gun to his head in his office in 2018. And Philemon Ngwenya, if it wasn't for Philemon Ngwenya, the whole Estina saga would probably only have unfolded much later. He was to be a beneficiary of that Estina project, or the Friede Dairy Farm project. And nothing happened, so he reported it. And for his troubles, he was stabbed to death in front of his shack. And we know Babita and what she has done. And then someone who really did not got any airtime, if you can put it that way, is Marumo Eric Peña. He blew the whistle on an huge IT fraud in Home Affairs. That was last year. In October last year, he people drove past him, shot him in his car. He was still alive, it seems, or it was just momentum. His car still progressed until it stopped eventually, probably, I suppose, when he passed on. And that is where the police got him. This wasn't even reported in the media until 2 weeks later. All right, then lastly, I know Kevin, you asked Martha to speak about the whistleblower house, but I will do so briefly if he asked me. So the whistleblower house, people, is in 2021, Bianca Goodson and I decided that, you know, everyone is just talking about, yes, government must protect whistleblowers. And yes, the activists out there, they are protesting. Whistleblowers need protection, they need help, and so on and so on. But one good day in July 2021, Bianca and I had a discussion, and we decided, you know what, talk is talk. And it's going to take a lot of time. So let's rather just do something. And that was a Saturday. And on the Monday, we got Ivan Pillay in the, I'm sure most of you know who he is. And we registered the Whistleblower House. Martha is one of our board members as well, came in very early in the process. And what we do at the Whistleblower House is we facilitate access for whistleblowers to pro bono legal advice and representation. So we have been very lucky that we have 9 big law firms who are helping us in this regard, providing their services pro bono. Then we provide also free of charge facilitate access to psychologists and psychological services. And we have the Psychological Association of South Africa, who is there for us. These psychologists can only provide 3 sessions per whistleblower, and they have advised us that whistleblowers need at least 10 sessions. So towards the end of last year, we have been very privileged to receive 2 very large donations from Business Leadership, Business Unity South Africa and the Millennium Trust. And now we can pay for those extra services for the psychological services. Then we provide security access to security services, improved security for our whistleblowers where needed. We are able to take them out of the environment to a safe house if needed, and now we have the money to be able to pay for that. We also try to just give back a sense of dignity to whistleblowers, in that now that we have funds, we can help whistleblowers who ask for it with paying their groceries, for example, the school fees of their children, or the uniforms of their children, or the books of their children, maybe transport money, maybe some petrol for their cars, small airtime, and as I've said, groceries, the bare minimum, things that they couldn't afford before. So we give that to them on a month-to-month basis, 3 months at a time, and then we reevaluate. So that is what the Whistleblower House is all about. And I think Martha and I are extremely proud to be associated with this organization. We are currently helping more than 130 whistleblowers. Just lastly, then we have also in another resource or help for whistleblowers, that is the Platform for the Protection of Whistleblowers in Africa. It was founded by a Frenchman, but we have our own people here that's helping, and PLAF focuses mainly on legal advice and representation, and then also helps with the safety of whistleblowers. And I now hand over to Martha. Pictured here at the commission. Thank you, Martha.
Thank you.
Just before Martha speaks, of course, I would like to introduce you, and thank you also, Lisa, for the really, really fascinating talk. I think one key takeaway for me is that whistleblowers report unethical practices out of commitment to the organization, and often at a real cost to them. And for me, I guess that begs a lot of questions. And I know there are many of us who would like to ask you so many questions. For example, is whistleblowing necessarily an altruistic act? And I see that there are other questions in the chat box, but we'll give you time to address those questions. So let me just quickly introduce the second speaker, Martha Ngoye. Martha is an attorney of the High Court. Currently, she practices as a corporate lawyer. She has many years of work experience with Edward Nathan and Freeland, Standard Bank, Barclays, and Transnet. Currently, Martha is employed at the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa. So indeed, Martha is a trailblazer. And we are excited to have her talk to us, to have her talk to this very enlightened audience on a topic I believe is really close to her heart. Before I yield the floor to you, Martha, again, I would like to remind the webinar participants to use the Q&A box to post their questions, and my colleague, Dr. Gillian, will moderate the Q&A session. So over to you, Martha.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. And really, thanks for this opportunity. I think one thing that it does, to somebody like me, is that it serves as a healing process. So it's part of a healing process to actually speak about it, and to share the knowledge and the experience that one has had to go through, you know, in light of one's experience as a whistleblower. But, you know, I always say that I am a capable professional that has turned into an accidental whistleblower. So I did not go out to blow the whistle. You know, I've just written a couple of things down just to say, you know, that when I dreamed of my future as a contributor to the economy, I did not think of myself as someone who will be needing to blow the whistle on corruption perpetrated by some among of the same people who gallantly fought against a system that muzzled dissent and fought for openness and democracy. And I think you know what I'm talking about there. Even the training that I received from university did not prepare me for fighting against people in leadership positions of my employer who had a difficulty with the values that I held dear and lived by. Even though my employer's walls are adorned with these beautiful framed statements of these values, and the statements flower the glossy strategic plans of my employer. Now, my expectation was that we are never going to have a fundamental difference about these values. We may differ slightly on what they mean, but we will not reach a point where I can safely say that ideals like honesty, integrity, batupele, the rule of law, etc., are hollow platitudes bandied about by those who claimed to have lost loved ones, limbs and livelihoods to birth a nation that holds these ideals dear. We know these stories. We know these speeches that have been made, you know, by the politicians, by those that are in power. And we know what they mean. I mean, when somebody stands out there and they basically tell you their contribution to the struggle, they always talk about, you know, what they went through to suffer. But it becomes very interesting that the very same people that have said they fought in the liberation movements and so on come back, and their behavior becomes something, you know, really to be concerned about. But anyway, let's go on. There are a number of whistleblowers that were pushed out. So, you know, as far as the topic goes today, you know, is whether the whistleblowing should exist within, you know, your field as medical professionals. And we know about Dr. Tim Meyer. And in fact, what happened with Dr. Tim Meyer at the time, and in my view, was that the experience that he received, and we all know his story because it was out there in the media. But the advantage was that civil society came behind and supported Dr. Tim Meyer. And letters were written to the presidency, to the Department of Health, to everybody to say, you are not going to touch him because he has spoken the truth. Now, this exists in 2022, 23 possibly. But at the time that one was faced with this challenge of having to blow the whistle, some of these organizations were not as well established as they are today. So one can comfortably and safely say, if you want to blow the whistle and you believe in it, the best thing for you to do is to understand exactly what it is that you're getting yourself into. Dr. Liesel has indicated, you know, the legalities and the issues that one needs to consider and the suffering that goes into it. My experience as a legal person having blown the whistle, shocked me to my wits' end because of the retaliation that then came against me and the victimization. Remember, what I started off with was saying that I'm just a capable professional that has turned a accidental whistleblower. And that's exactly it. So today I actually, refer myself rather to the notion of being a corruption buster, because people have ridiculed us as whistleblowers. They've called us names. I mean, my experience within my organization and having had the need to stop the transactions. I mean, I'm talking about billions of rands, transactions which I stopped at PRASA. And because I'm the group executive of legal risk and compliance, it was my duty to ensure that we do not get into transactions that are illegal, that are unlawful. And, I needed to make sure that I'm protecting the organization. And having done that has actually had me having a target put on my back, because that there are people that are inside that have interests in these particular transactions and that want to stand to benefit because they know what they are doing. So I believe, and I believe wholeheartedly so, and I've said it in public, that people get given mandates, right, to come into an institution, and this is what they get told they need to do. Now, this person comes with a particular mandate and finds you as professionals whose sole role and responsibility is seeing to the interests and the well-being of your patients. Got nothing else to do with whatever mandate that they've been given. But you dare interfere with the mandate that they have been given, then you become victimized. You become, I was at one point said to be a persona non grata at PRASA, as though I don't exist. So I've been going through this particular experience of mine. Dr. Lisa, if I look at it, since 2015, and only because I was doing my job. And for me, having appeared at the Zondo Commission made matters worse for me, because then I had to be taught a lesson by the very organization whose interests I had protected. What became of me? I was fired, right? I had to go to court. In fact, one of the things that happened before I was fired, the Department of Transport Director General called a meeting at PRASA and said, I have become rogue, I must be dealt with, I must be fired, and I must know that I will never be able to withstand the might of the state as far as my pockets are concerned. So, and they will make my life very miserable. My life has been very miserable. I think I've become stronger now because I've had the support that I've had. But when things started, it was not easy. So I think what I want to say to you is that initially, I started off by being fired by PRASA. They fired me and said I have a 5-year contract, which is a lie, and I won it, and they appeal, and they do all sorts of things. And then when they realized that they cannot succeed, they then, subjected me to a disciplinary hearing. Trumped up charges. Dr. Liesel has spoken about trumped up. You'll never believe what they are capable of finding and wanting to put against your name. So when you do blow the whistle, you must know that these are the issues and the potential perils that you are going to experience. And you must be strong enough to withhold and go through that particular experience. And you can never do it alone. You can't do it alone. I don't think that I would have survived the experience that I have survived as a whistleblower if I was on my own. I have a daughter in matric. When she was writing matric, she became the parent in the family because she became worried about me. And depression is not easy. You will never know what it is like to sit there depressed and think that you are worthless. Worthless, why? Because you did the right thing. So I think what one is saying, and Dr. Liesel has covered quite a lot. My story is very long. It's still going on as we speak right now, is to ensure, and from the experiences that some of us have had, you must know you're going to suffer psychologically. You must know that you're going to suffer financially. You must know that when you decide to do this, you're going to have an impact on your family. The doctor has spoken about these things. They are real, they happen. You know, psychologically, I mean, I was a wreck. And at some point, I mean, I had to give up my finances of having to go to see a psychologist to cater for my daughter, who then needed psychological assistance. And I had, because now my finances were going to lawyers. So the reality is one needs to have an appreciation of what one will face when you decide to blow the whistle. But it's up to you. When you see that things are wrong and that they're not justified and people's rights are trampled upon, it is up to you to have that will to say, I am going to do it and I will stand by what I have done. And if I had been asked to do it again, I will do it again. Because here it is, unless we do that, and remember in most cases, you know, the environments that we work in, we've got the person, the poor, that whose interests we need to protect. Now, if we don't do that and allow the corruptors to continue, then we have ourselves to blame. But also, as far as the legislation is concerned, it's important, and organizations like the Whistleblower House have come in because we realized what it requires, you know, to talk about whistleblowing, what it means, because you may think that you're a whistleblower, and then the legislation turns out and says, actually, what you did was not whistleblowing. So you need to be very careful when you want to do something, to know exactly what it is and the parameters within which you will be working, so that you don't find yourself now being hampered by the legal process. And the issues of whistleblowers really, even within the legal system, have not been tested quite extensively. I've gone through it. I mean, it is a point where you go to the CCMA, effectively you've got to start at the CCMA, and the CCMA then tells you we don't have jurisdiction to deal with protected disclosure. Dr. Liesel spoke about the Protected Disclosure Act. That's the act that you need to memorize and really keep in mind. There is a drive right now for this particular act to be amended because we believe that it does not sufficiently protect the interests of the whistleblower. But anyway, in the interim, make sure that you use that particular act as your Bible, because what then happens is that when the CCMA says we don't have jurisdiction, you go to the labor court. It's another process in the labor court. It's monies, which you may have to obviously use coming out of your pocket. The results of being a whistleblower are dire. Psychologically, I think I have become stronger now because of the experience and because I've had to share my knowledge and my story with a lot of people. There would not be a time where I was able to speak for 10 minutes and not be emotional about what I was going through. It is horror. It is debilitating. And, you know, sometimes when I hear people speak about whistleblowers, it pains me because unless you are a whistleblower, you have got absolutely no clue what it is and what it feels like. I mean, we've got people like Themba Maseko. He's now admits it took him about 10 years before he could get a job. Mosilo Motepu, Bianca Goodson, doctor has spoken about. These are professionals who right now suffer from post-traumatic stress disorders. We all have it. Why? Because you were doing the right job. So I think in a nutshell, it it is important to know exactly what you're doing. And I think also if you don't have policies within the respective organizations that you work in, ensure that you have policies that deal with whistleblowing and participate in the drafting of those policies, because at the end of the day, they will work for you. I was charged even for appearing at the Zondo Commission. They failed to prove all the charges against me. What they have done right now is they have applied to the Labour Court to review my case, to review the judgment and to stay the award aside. Now, what it means is that I have to start again afresh and find legal financial assistance to be able to take on this particular process again, after having spent millions of rands out of my own pocket on lawyers. So I think I'm going to stop there and say, at the end of the day, taking into cognizance the information that Dr. Liesel has given you, and understanding exactly who you are as an individual, because we are not all going to be able to do this. I mean, if you don't have the strength, the willpower, or the ability to really go out and make sure that you will be able to fight the system, then you might find yourself really even dying because of the stress. So I've been through it all. I've been stressed. I've been deformed actually facially because of the number of medication that I've been on, but I'm still standing. And it's important, it is your own conviction to say at the end of the day, this is what I'm going to do. It is important to do it, and know that when you do it, you must go and stand and be able to stand right till the end. There are several organization movements that have been set up that assist whistleblowers. And I think things are easier now for whistleblowers than they were, a couple of years ago. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Gillian, would you handle the Q&A for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I've just had to run to another office because my computer screen froze. So thanks to Cornelius for letting me come and sit in his office here. And thank you very much, Martha and Liesel, for that very enlightening, but also painful as I sat here listening to your story, Martha. And I wish you all the best with what you're still having to go through. But I certainly, sitting here behind my screen, I was so captivated by your story. So yeah, just wish you all the best with all of that. And also to Liesel, all the best with your organization and what you really are also intending to do to provide the support and assistance to these individuals who are standing up for the right in our society, particularly because we are plagued with so many problems within business and government. So I'm just going to look at what some of the participants or the audience members have said here, and I think that Liesel has attempted to answer some, so I'm just going to quickly go through. We acknowledge Wendy, who's just acknowledging this whole issue around being silenced, especially in the healthcare professions, I assume here. And Wendy just made a comment that the Progressive Health Forum has assisted in many ways. And just some thanks for your presentation. And then somebody asked, is it safe to be a whistleblower in South Africa currently?
Well, I can answer that question and say it's not.
I suppose you probably are the most expert one, yeah?
Yeah, it's not safe. I mean, I've had to change my car because I've had people followed. We know about Babita Diakara. We know about, the instances that it's not safe because you are now interfering in people's lives and they don't want you to interfere in them. So it is not safe at all.
Thank you for that.
Can I just come
yeah,
in
yeah,
there,
please do, please
And
do.
So, yeah, I agree. But I also think, Martha, and please, if I'm completely out of line, tell me, is that there are ways that one can protect yourself to some extent by being aware, like Martha, being aware that she is being followed. And then, of course, one can ask help for those people who doesn't have the means to do so. Is it safe? No, like you've said, probably not, no. But I think there are ways that one can, to some extent, protect oneself. And yeah, I've written some things about that that I got from whistleblowers. So I'll send that to Kevin.
Mhm. Thanks. I think the other kind of question I'm seeing here is probably pretty much in the same domain. Is it really worth it to make oneself a living sacrifice? This is just too much. I think that kind of speaks to the question around the safety. And then somebody's making comments about VITs, but I don't think that either one of you are probably going to be appropriate to be able to answer that.
Nope.
Yeah. And then just some salutations and to you, to both of you, and just acknowledging as well the mental and physical aspects of whistleblowing in our country, particularly. Yeah, just see some law, is it? Somebody just commenting on the inadequate legal protections, etc. And then somebody asked if Andre de Ruyter qualifies as a whistleblower.
Do you want to go for that, Doctor? Because I've got my own views, and I will tell you. I mean, and
You go first.
Having worked in a state-owned enterprise, I could feel what he was feeling at the time that he was disclosing the information that is there. The reality is that you are never going to have people come out honestly and say this information has been given to us and we didn't about it. People are never going to do that. They're always going to find excuses and now make it a political hoo-ha of what we see where Andre de Ruyter is concerned. If you were to ask me, is he a whistleblower? I believe that he is. And that's why there is this attack, this wanting to get him type of attitude that is coming from our government and the various politicians, because that's what you pay for being a whistleblower. I believe that all that information that is there has been there, because I know since 2015 I've reported things to the Hawks, and to date nothing has been done. So that's my take on where he is. Yeah, and I would classify him as a whistleblower.
I would also agree with you. Definitely, I would classify him as a whistleblower. He has, if we look again at that definition, he has spoken out to those people that he believed that we will support him and will take action. And that has not happened. Okay, now, of course, there's the counterattacks. Typically, when Martha, what happens? The counterattacks, because now we are feeling threatened, so let's rather just make him out as the bad person, and like they do with what they did with you, Martha, and with so many other whistleblowers. But I do believe the evidence is there. I believe that 110%, and that will come out one day. But in the meantime, he is sort of also gone underground to some extent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Martha and Liesl. The other question that we've got here is whether you think that the term whistleblower may need rebranding, I'm just reading it, to shift the negative connotations that surround the term, basically shift the mindset to encourage the see something, say something mindset. And I think Martha's maybe kind of alluded to that with the corruption buster concept, kind of like superheroes.
So, because, you know, as we say, I mean, Dr. Liesel did indicate that effectively what we are seen as impimpis. And impimpi is dealt with in a particular way if we were to understand exactly in the past how impimpis were dealt with. That's what we're seen as, not necessarily as people who are protecting yours and my money, right, which is being abused by the state, which you don't have, by the way, because you don't stand to benefit out of the corruption that is happening. But for whatever reason, you know, I really do think I just cringe now, you know, when one refers to me as a whistleblower, because I believe I've done more than that. You know, I've done more than blowing the whistle. What was the end result of my blowing the whistle? You know, I've stopped the corruption that was intended at PRASA. And that's the end goal at the end of the day, you know. So maybe we should look at it.
And there was a movement at some point in time in Europe that to move away from the word whistleblower and rather, you know, say a reporter, and encourage people to speak up or speak out. That has been trampled on when the EU directive, whistleblowing directive, came into force a couple of years ago, 2019 or something. So then all the good work in trying to change whistleblowing to something else just reverted back to whistleblower. From the Ethics Institute side, where I work, we are trying to talk more about safe reporting or a reporter instead of someone, you know, a whistleblower. We're also trying to move away from that and the negative connotation. Apparently there are some hands up.
Yeah, I see. And I'm not sure whether those are sort of like legacy hands because they've been up since you started your presentation. But I'm going to invite them to just put their questions or comments in the Q&A facility here. I think, you know, just I don't see anything new there, but I think there was that question which you've answered online, Liesel, but perhaps maybe others haven't seen it. So I'm just going to kind of erase it here. And that was the question of the negative aspect to the concept of a whistleblower. From the descriptors, everything seems that this person is upstanding and noble. Are there instances in which whistleblowing may be a negative action? That is a whistleblower who paints a negative light of an institution that may not be correct, etc.
I think it's also important because sometimes, and this is one of the things, Dr. Lisa, that we look at, you know, as part of the whistleblower house to say, is this person really a whistleblower? Because you may find that sometimes people just come in because they've done something wrong, and then they feel that, yes, they need to be protected in a particular way, and then they call themselves whistleblowers. So not everybody qualifies, you know, as a whistleblower. And it's important for that to be recognized as well, because there could be an abuse, you know, of you know, people calling themselves whistleblowers all over the show. And then it makes matters even worse for those whistleblowers that really did blow the whistle, you know, for ethical reasons and understanding it, exactly what it is that they were doing. But one of the things I think that whistleblowers go through, which I didn't mention, is that you'll be defamed. I mean, you can imagine in my case where as a group executive of legal risk and compliance, I sit on the non-practicing role of lawyers. Now, there were newspaper articles that called me corrupt and everything. And you can imagine what that does to my profession and what it would do. So that the defamation aspects will come. So you must know that that is also another factor because sometimes the media also deals with us very badly in terms of reporting stories, and they're one-sided. So all those challenges one will have to face when you decide to go and blow the whistle.
I think just to add, sorry, to that, Martha, the last comment about the media, it was Suzanne Daniels that blew the whistle at ESCOM, that at some point she said at a public forum, she said, the media must just remember there are people behind their headlines, people with their families behind the headlines that they are out and about on about whistleblowers. And the thing that I mentioned in the chat then also in this regard was that there are malicious whistleblowers. And they do so because of whatever reason it could be, because they're disgruntled or that they are angry at the arrogance of management or the arrogance of the organization and so on. If one is a good investigator, it is actually easy to detect these malicious reports, and over time especially, there's ways of determining it. But what I put in the chat also is that malicious reporting is a criminal offense according to the Protected Disclosures Act as amended, and it is punishable with 2 years imprisonment. I think it's a 200,000 to 250,000 fine up to, or both. So we always advise that in policies and organizations' policies that must be included because it serves as a deterrent, hopefully, to malicious whistleblowers.
Thank you. It was almost like you preempted what was going to be my next question and then spoke about it, and bringing in the media and the role of journalists in this. And I think that was you've touched on that. But also maybe talk about the ways perhaps as one of the comments here was around journalists also being able to provide some form of protection. In that yes. They make public what hides in the dark, and they don't disclose their sources.
Yes. And it's true. When you look at, and I think generalization sometimes is bad, but you do have those bad apples within the media who just don't do their work, right? In my case, when PRASA released a statement that said the group executive of legal corruption and was going to be sued for 58 million rands, I was not even approached by any media person before they went out and spread these lies about me. So what I did, I then picked up the phone and phoned that very person and said, do you know who you're speaking to? I am the Martha Ngoye that you've just spoken about. Did you care to hear my side of the story? Just because it was PRASA's board chairperson that said what they said, you then assume that just because they are the board person, they are correct in what they're saying. And I flipped with that person and I just was not having it, because it is a problem and people must do their research. And I think there has been, Mandy Wiener has been phenomenal, insofar as whistleblower issues have been concerned, and other, media personnel, because they've gone in and they've wanted to know the exact story, and they've not taken the one side. So I think there's been a lot of change right now in terms of how, the media has also approached this.
Thank you very much for that. The other question, is really whether you've had some examples of whistleblowers that had a positive outcome, where tangible changes have happened, given the high cost to the individual.
I don't know. I think it's taken years. I just spoke about Temba Maseko, who is with Words. It took 10 years, for something to come through for him. It's interesting that, the whistleblowers, at least that I know, and the professionals that we are, take for instance, Cynthia. Cynthia, you know, at SAA, Cynthia is a treasurer, but she can't get a job. Why? Because she blew the whistle, you know. It's very difficult. And it's like both the private and the public sector just don't want to have anything to do with you when you're a whistleblower. There's a lot of speak out there about, you know, protecting whistleblowers, but it's just lip service, you know, because we are feeling it. I can't go and apply for a job right now, because if I do, the issues of PRASA follow me. And that is what is then looked at. At some point, for instance, one was trying to, you know, raise the buddy financing scheme, thinking that could happen. That was not even allowed, you know, because of the connotations attached to a whistleblower. So what is stuck? So I don't know if you know any, Dr. Liesel, but where I'm sitting, you get, I suppose when you also connected, you might be lucky. But Fuzile from National Treasury, he blew the whistle. But at least I guess with his position in government, he was able to get a position at Standard Bank. But I can't say that for 99.99% of the other whistleblowers that are there.
Just in terms of, now I agree with you, Martha. In terms of something good happening because of changes in processes or in organizations, perhaps in terms of whistleblowers, I had now to think really hard. But I'm thinking of the case of the Boeing Max. There were 11 whistleblowers that blew the whistle after Ethiopian Airlines, I think it was 320, with its 153 passengers fell. But they were, after that, at least, the whistleblowers reported the design faults and things there. That has helped. And then this is now a long way back, but the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in America, for example, on which our first King report was largely based, resulted as from the Enron scandal. And Enron was, I mean, we know that a whistleblower informed the world about what was going on at Enron. So huge changes in that regard. In organizations itself, we wouldn't know because those things are not published widely. I don't think we will know, but I do believe, Martha, that some good does come. You stopped corruption. You stopped those deals. Cynthia Simple stopped that other deal at SAA.
Yes.
Yeni was my Linguist director. I mean, that's good. That's the result. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess look at it that way. I guess, yes, you're right.
Yes. Yeah.
I suppose sometimes it's hard to see the trees from the forest, Martha.
Oh, yes. Oh, goodness.
So we're kind of heading towards 6:30, which is when we're supposed to finish. So I'm just going to take one more question, looking at the Q&A, and then I will hand over to Kevin again to just take us, do his conclusion, etc. But one of the comments that I've just looked, or questions and comments here, relates to exactly what we've just been talking about, the length in which it takes for some kind of a resolution. And you've obviously spoken at length a little bit about giving us some insight into your story, which you say is ongoing. And when that will end, you know, right now you don't seem to know. So I suppose the question then is do you think that there's a need to change the existing laws and regulations? How, you know, what can be done to try to improve the situation that we're currently sitting with?
There is a drive to have the current legislation amended because it doesn't sufficiently protect whistleblowers. And there's been a lot of work that has been done also by civil society, you know, in suggesting proposed amendments to the Whistleblower Act, to the Protected Disclosure Act. And I think what's important is that, and that's why I spoke about it being important for people to understand what is contained in that act, because you may think that you're protected by the Act and you're not. Because right now, the Protected Disclosure Act is limited to people who are employees. For instance, I suppose it would apply in this particular instance because it would be employees who would want to go and report. But otherwise, if you're not an employee and you think you're wanting to report corruption, it doesn't protect you. So we wanted that definition to be broadened, and also issues around occupational detriment. There is a need to have the legislation amended. And then I think the minister has since said that the Department of Justice is working on the amendments. We'll have to see what it is that they've proposed, and we'll have to obviously participate in the commentary that may be required at the time that commentary is asked for. But the need is there because the current legislation just is not sufficient.
And I think what is also important, Martha, which is a bit of a change in terms of previous processes of getting legislation changed, is although initially relevant government departments have started out now, and we heard from the Minister Lamola that there's now changes, or that they are working on the Act, and none of us in civil society or the whistleblowers knew about it. But now they've actually started approaching us. They've approached the Whistleblower House. They've approached the Ethics Institute, and I'm very sure that they have approached many others as well. And I still believe, and I told the Public Service Commission, or the DPS the other day, that if they want to know how to change the Act, they have to go to the whistleblowers, because you guys will know.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Martha and Liesel. I'm not sure if you have anything additional you want to add, but I think, you know, if anything is to go by, I think in terms of the audience, I think that you've got a lot of support here, and maybe just, you know, if you can just let us know is that we can get through to the if anybody wants to get hold of you, they can go through this whistleblowerhouse.org. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think it's important. And I think maybe if I can just say finally, before one goes out and does anything, the Whistleblower House is there, and it will guide as to, you know, the processes that must be followed and what you need to do right at the onset, unlike some of us who had to deal with this thing the other way around. But it's important for people to have this information and to know that they can approach the Whistleblower House and ask for the assistance, so that when you do blow the whistle, you know you've covered all the areas and the angles.
May I also just,
yeah, please.
Sorry, Julian, just, I don't know if you can see on the screen, I've put a slide
Yes,
up.
I can see that.
Yeah. So I just want to say to everyone else there is a toolkit that I've written, the Whistleblowing Non-Retaliation Toolkit. And it's very practical, and it talks about what organizations should do not to retaliate against people. But what I've actually, there's part there that provides advice to employees who are being retaliated against as we speak. And then also advice to people who consider blowing the whistle on how they can protect themselves.
Yeah.
As they blow the whistle. So these are available for free download at the Ethics Institute, the website there. So please use it.
Thank you very much again. I think I'm just going to hand you straight over to Kevin now, so he can do the wrap up. But again, thank you very much for coming here tonight and talking to us about this very important topic, but also letting us know what is being done and opening up this opportunity for us also to come and join you to be corruption busters, superheroes. Yes. You just need a theme song now, Martha. Over to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Julian. Well, thanks, everyone. I guess we all realize that legislatively, there's a lot that can be done to improve the protections in the current Act. But that sort of thing takes time. What has heartened me during this time that we've spent together is just realizing that there are resources out there for those who might be struggling with whether or not the cost of whistleblowing is worth it, struggling with themselves and their conscience about whether they should be saying something about something that they have seen. I think that there are resources available for those people even before the laws change. And there's somewhere for them to go in which they can have a conversation with someone and say, I'm considering doing this, and what should I be taking into account? And I to be offering people. So certainly I would encourage people who find themselves considering blowing a whistle to approach people like the Whistleblowers House and to get the kind of assistance that they need. Clearly, in addition to changes to the law, there also has to be provision made for whistleblowers to be able to continue to support their families when they're no longer employed. There needs to be help for them legally, and those sorts of things are being provided through various organizations, but a lot more of that is needed. So what can we do? I guess we can try to support those kinds of organizations as well, if we're not in the situation in which we have unfortunately find ourselves having to ask whether our conscience directs us to report on behaviors that are unacceptable. Within the professions, of course, there's a kind of double duty. There is a duty not just to the employer or even to the people. There's also a duty to the profession itself. And very often there are requirements of reporting certain kinds of unethical behavior on the part of other colleagues. And so also bear in mind that there are other channels other than just going to the public, that there also within the profession opportunities to raise concerns. Thank you all for your time. Thank you so much, Liesl and Marta, for sharing with us and for pointing us in a direction and giving us some hope, I think. We do know that it is very costly, very often for whistleblowers, and we respect them very much for what they do. But we also are grateful that there are at least some resources for them now. Thank you, audience, for being with us. Thanks to Gillian and Cornelius, and to Sam Keller for organizing events as always. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.